Hello everyone, it's me again, Ling, and today I will tell you about Indian camp. Day after day was hotter than the day before. The wind was hot as if it came out of an oven, Ma said. The grass was turning yellow. The whole world was rippling green and gold under the blazing sky. At noon, the wind died, no bird sang. Everything was so still that Laura could hear the squirrels chattering in the trees down by the creek. Suddenly black crows flew overhead, cawing their roof-sharp caws. Then everything was still again. Ma said that this was midsummer. Pa wondered where the Indians had gone. He said they had left their leather camp on the prairie, and one day he asked Laura and Mary if they would like to see the camp. Laura jumped up and down and clapped her hands with my object. "It is so far, Charles," she said, and in this heat, Pa's blue eyes twinkled. "This heat doesn't hurt the Indians and it won't hurt us," he said. "Come on, girls. Please can Jack come too?" Laura begged. Pa had taken his gun, but he looked at Laura and he looked at Jack. Then he looked at Ma, and he put the gun up on its pegs again. "All right, Laura," he said. "I'll take back Caroline and leave you the gun." Jack jumped around them, wagging his stump of a tail as soon as he saw which way they were going. He set off, trotting ahead. Pa came next, and behind him came Mary, and then Laura. Mary kept her sunbonnet on, but Laura let hers dangle down her back. The ground was hot under their bare feet. The sunshine pierced around their faded dress and tinged on their arms and backs. The air was really as hot as the air in an oven, and it smelled faintly like baking bread. Pa said the smell came from all the grass seeds parching in the heat. They went farther and farther into the vast prairie. Laura felt smaller and smaller. Even Pa did not seem as big as he really was. At last, they went down and into the little hollow where the Indians had camped. Jack started up, a big rabbit. When it bounded out of the grass, Laura jumped. Pa said quickly, "Let him go, Jack. We have meat enough." So Jack sat down and watched the big rabbit go bounding away down the hollow. Laura and Mary looked around them. They stayed close to Pa. Low bushes grew on the sides of the hollow, buck-brush with sprays of berries, faintly pink, and sumac holding up green cones showing here and there a bright red leaf. The golden rods plums were turning gray, and the ox-eyed daisies' yellow petals hung down from the crown centers. All that was hidden in the secret little hollow. From the house, Laura had seen nothing but grasses, and now from this hollow, she could not see the house. The prairie seemed to be level, but it was never level. Laura asked Pa if there were lots of hollows on the prairie like this one. He said there were. "Are Indians in them?" She almost whispered. He said he didn't know. There might be. She held tight his hand, and Mary held his other hand. And they looked at the Indians' camp. There was ashes where Indian campfires had been. There were holes in the ground where tent poles had been driven. Bones were scattered where Indian dogs had gnawed them. All along the sides of the hollow, Indian ponies had bitten the grasses short. Tracks of big moccasins and smaller moccasins were everywhere, and tracks of little bare toes, and over these tracks were tracks of rabbits and tracks of birds and wolves. Tracks. Pa read the tracks of Mary and Laura. He showed them tracks of two middle-sized moccasins by each of campfires, ashes. The track of her toes inside the moccasins was deeper than the track of her heels, because she had learned for a word to stir something cooking in a pot on the fire. Then Pat picked up a smoke-blackened forked steak, and he said that the pot had hung from a stake laid across the top of two upright forked stakes. He showed Mary and Laura the holes where the forked stakes had been driven into the ground. Then he told them to look at the bones around the campfire and tell him what had looked in that pot. They looked and they said, "Rabbit." They was right. The bones was rabbit bones. Suddenly Laura shouted, "Look, look! Something bright blue glittered in the dust." She picked it up, and it was a beautiful blue bead. Laura shouted with joy. Then Mary saw a red bed, and Laura saw a green one, and they forgot everything but beads. Pa helped them look. They found white beads and brown beads and more red and blue beads. All that afternoon they hunted for beads in the dust of the Indian camp. Now and then Pa walked up to the edge of the hollow and looked toward home. Then he came back and helped to hunt for more beads. Then they looked all the ground over carefully when they couldn't find any more. It was almost sunset. Laura had a handful of beads, and so did Mary. Pa tied them carefully in her handkerchief. Laura's beads in one corner and Mary's in another corner. He put the handkerchief in his pocket, and they started home. The sun was low behind their backs where they came out of the hollow. Home was small and very far away, and Pa did not have his gun. Pa walked so swiftly that Laura could hardly keep up. They trotted as fast as she could, but the sun sank faster. Home seemed farther and farther away. The prairie seemed larger, and a wind ran over it, whispering something frightening. All the grasses shook as if they were scared. Then Pa turned around and his blue eyes twinkled at Laura. He said, "Getting tired, little half-pint. It's a long way for little legs." He picked her up, big girl that she was, and he settled her safe against his shoulder. He took Mary by the hand, and so they all came home together. Supper was cooking on the fire. Ma was setting in the table, and baby Carrie played with little pieces of wood on the floor. Pa tossed the handkerchief to Ma. "I'm later than I mean to, Caroline," he said, "but look what the girls found." He took the milk bucket and went quickly to bring Pat and Patty from the picket lines, and to milk the cow. Ma untied the handkerchief and exclaimed at what she found. The beads were even prettier than they had been in the Indian camp. Laura stirred her beads with her finger and watched them sparkle and shine. "These are mine," she said. Then Mary said, "Carrie can have mine." Ma wanted to hear what Laura would say. Laura didn't want to say anything. She wanted to keep those pretty beads. Her chest felt all hot inside, and she wished with all her might that Mary wouldn't always be such a good little girl. But she couldn't let Mary be better than she was, so she said slowly, "Carrie, can I have mine too? That's my unselfish, good little girls," said Ma. She poured Mary's beads into Mary's hands and Laura's into Laura's hands, and she said she would give them a thread to string on. The beads would make a pretty necklace for Carrie and Laura, wear around her neck. Mary and Laura sat side by side on their bed, and they strung those pretty beads on their thread that Ma gave them. Each wet her end of the thread in her mouth and twisted tightly. Then Mary put her end of thread through the small hole in each of the braids, and Laura put her end of her beads one by one. They didn't say anything. Perhaps Mary felt sweet and good inside, but Laura didn't when she looked at Mary. She wanted to slap her, so she dared not look at Mary again. The beads made a beautiful string. Carrie clapped her hands and laughed when she saw it. Then Ma tied it around Carrie's little neck, and it glittered there. Laura felt a little bit better. After all, her beads were not enough beads to make a whole string, and neither were Mary's, but together they made a whole string of beads of Carrie. When Carrie felt the beads on her neck, she grabbed at them, and she was so little that she did not know any better than to break the string. So Ma untied it, and she put the beads away until Carrie should be old enough to wear them. And after all, Laura thought of those pretty beads, and she was still naughty enough to want her beads of herself. But it had been a wonderful day. She could always think about a long walk across the prairie and about all they had seen in the giant Indian camp. And this is of my reading today, and thank you for listening, and goodbye. See you next video.